Hello everyone and welcome to another movie review. Today we're taking a look at Alice Through the Looking Glass. This is a sequel to the Tim Burton adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. That movie wasn't really well received by critics or audiences because it was a bit of a mix of both original books, which includes Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass books. This one is a sequel that's supposed to be about Through the Looking Glass book, but instead this movie decides to go for a more original touch and an original story rather than trying to adapt so many stories from the old books. And I think in that way this movie turns out pretty okay. Let's talk more about it now. Through the Looking Glass takes place a few years after the events of Alice in Wonderland. I would say around 3 to 4 years sort of thing. And we get to see how is Alice doing after her decision with her father to become a captain of a boat and all that travels. Unfortunately, the movie takes a lot of time introducing what is going on with Alice in the real world that can sometimes be pretty boring and uninteresting. That part I understand it trying to make a story so that in the long run after she goes to Wonderland in the end she's gonna learn a lesson, but I couldn't help myself but feel like those sections in particular are very weak because the dialogue isn't really that great and the story overall with those characters in the real world are just not compelling enough to really justify their scenes in there. That said, there's an intention of making Alice grow as a character with those elements, but ultimately I feel like Alice is just a little flat. I'm not sure what I can say about Alice. Like, I don't mean to say that she's bad as a character, but it feels like it's missing something. This is something I had a problem in the first film, that I just didn't feel compelled to be with Alice in this adventure because I didn't find her character interesting. She was too neutral, to say the least. In here, she's a bit more passionate. There's an intention of trying to make her more interesting, but in the end, it just doesn't really work. Finally, after Alice goes into the world of Wonderland, that's when things become more interesting. Not exactly because of the story, but because visually it's just much more interesting, and it's definitely one of the reasons that you come see this movie, because the first movie wasn't exactly that great in terms of story or dialogue and characters, but visually it was really great. Costumes, special effects, there was an overall really great presentation, and this one does not disappoint in terms of that department. To summarize a little bit of the plot without spoiling too much, Alice goes back to Wonderland and she realizes that the Mad Hatter is not feeling well and she must do something to help him and make him feel better, or otherwise he could die because of his feeling sick. In order to save him, she has to time travel to a moment in the past and change some certain things. This is when the character of Time enters the scene, which is a brand new character for this film, and I think it's completely original, not part of the books. And I think that Time itself is a very interesting character, and I find it one of the more good parts of the film because it's creative. His not only the character itself, but the tower, the clock tower that he lives on, and all the dialogue and process of development of how time works, how he makes things, how everything is controlled by time. There's a lot of information that it's very creative, and I find it very original and nice touch overall. And Time is an interesting character because he's kind of human, but he's also kind of robotic, like a clock in a way. And the way that the tower of clock is connected to him in some way, again, not gonna spoil you so much, but is a very interesting character nonetheless. And I think Sasha does a very nice acting of the character by making him goofy but at the same time serious and respectable. I think it has a nice little mix overall to it. and I think he really matches in very well with this world of characters. The whole aspect of time travel is an interesting adventure, although perhaps the movie feels a little too similar to other time travel movies. In the end, the whole plot feels a little predictable in the end. Like if you've seen a lot of time travel movies, you already know the outcomes and possibilities of what's going to happen in the story in some ways. But I think the great thing, without spoiling too much, is that traveling to the past with Alice gives us a bit more depth to the characters of Alice in Wonderland. We get to know about their past, how some characters became what they are. And I think that's an interesting aspect of Through the Looking Glass, and that makes the movie work a little bit for me because it's about the characters. It's not about presenting you the world. Like the first movie was presenting you the world and there was a large scope place, but ultimately the story was not there to handle the scope. I think here instead they focus on the characters. They focus on the fact that these characters are unique in their own way, and that the costumes and the looks are amazing in the movie. So they really focus on that aspect rather than focusing on the large scope of what is Wonderland itself. So overall, in terms of plot, I think it's a pretty nice film. It's not elaborate, it's not super deep, it's not something spectacular, wow, big plot twist or anything, but it's interesting. I mean, if you liked a little bit the first movie, then I think you'll be interested in seeing what things they play around with this one, because personally I like the story involved in this one a bit more. In terms of the acting, I think everyone did a pretty good job overall. I think some characters didn't have a lot to play with. Perhaps the biggest problem of the film is the fact that it goes through these elements a little too quickly. Like, we're going into a development segment, but then we quickly jump into this other thing, and there's like these little plots of different little characters that can sometimes feels like a little rushed in rather than getting to know the character and go even deeper with them. Like the potential was there to go even deeper with these characters, but instead we go for more traditional, quick, fun moments rather than focusing on more storytelling. That said, overall, I think Alice Through the Looking Glass is a pretty good, decent film. Like, I didn't really like the first one. Like, I complained a lot about the first one. But this one, I felt a bit more engaged. I feel like I really liked the characters more. I felt more compelled by the characters, and I was able to recognize how different each character are. Like, visually, the presentation is really great. There's some really nice visuals and some very creative decisions as well. But ultimately, the problem with this film is that the plot itself doesn't really go farther ahead, considering that they have so many great characters here, that it's just a matter of expanding the roles and focusing a bit more on them. Sometimes these films just take too much center stage on Alice, and that's fine, she's a protagonist, but ultimately you can't help yourself just feel that the other characters are just more interesting, because Alice is more or less like us. Alice is just watching the world and trying to save it, what we would be doing. So instead, I think the audience wants to see more of what's going on in Wonderland, what's going on more with these characters and the whole fantasy world. Still, if you enjoyed the first film, I think you'll have some fun moments here with this second sequel. And if you didn't like the first one, well, you could give this one a try if you have time. I mean, it's not gonna be that amazing for you, or at least you could try waiting to rent it or something. But anyways, still, I find it a fun watch, and I would watch it again sometime maybe. Not the first movie. The first movie I only seen it once, and I haven't really given it a chance again because I was not very pleased with it. But yeah, overall, Through the Looking Glass, I give it a 7 out of 10. Thank you for watching this movie review. Stay tuned for more. I actually have no idea what's gonna be our next movie review, so stay tuned. And be sure to check out our other videos. We have figure reviews, video game reviews, and much more. See you next time!